I'm stating the obvious, but female vocal synths greatly outnumber the male voices. Even as the ratio gets a bit more even in the era of Dreamtonics and the V6 defaults, the most popular voice banks are still pretty much all girls. Miku, Teto, Gumi, etc. And if you look at the most viewed Vocaloid songs on YouTube, and thank you as ever to Vocastats, there isn't a single male voice bank in the top 25. 3's Telecaster B-Boy with Kagamini Len clocks in at 39, but Len was voiced by female singer Shimoda Asami. If you want synths that can be traced back to samples from an adult cisgender man, you're not even going to find a single song in the top 100. There are plenty of reasons for this imbalance, but if you want to look at it through the most mercenary supply versus demand lens, you can more or less trace it back to just one voice bank. This is the story of KAITO, the only Vocaloid to ever formally be declared a failure, and how he bounced back to become one of the community's most beloved characters. KAITO was the first Japanese male Vocaloid, and only the 5th Vocaloid ever when he was released for the original engine on February 14, 2006. His voice provider is Fuga Naoto, a veteran singer and voice actor whose best-known credit prior to voicing KAITO was probably as the prince in the Japanese dub of Disney's Cinderella. Fuga Naoto is a stage name derived from the phrase Fuga no Oto, which translates to tasteful sound, while he's kept his legal name private. Fuga was involved pretty much from the beginning of the whole Vocaloid project, because even though KAITO was the last of the V1s, they were all developed more or less at the same time, starting from the early 2000s when Yamaha still called the whole thing Project Daisy. The prototype version of his and Meiko's voice banks featured in a song released all the way back in the summer of 2003, a cover of a song called That Wonderful Love Once More on an album called History of Logic System. KAITO also got his first solo demo song around there, titled Rumor of Yours. Again, this was several months before any Vocaloid product was available, and years before KAITO would be ready to go on the market. At the time, the voice bank was not yet the KAITO we know. His original codename was actually Taro, which is a common Japanese placeholder name, like how a hypothetical everyman in the English-speaking world might be called John Smith. You also might have noticed that I've been talking about Yamaha and not Krypton Future Media. At this stage, Krypton had no involvement in the technical development of any voice banks. They were just responsible for the distribution of KAITO and Meiko, and only took an active recording role once they started working on Hatsune Miku. Krypton also handled the marketing for KAITO and Meiko, of which there admittedly wasn't very much. One noteworthy bit of outrage they did do was opening up Taro's final name for public input. KAITO was a suggestion of Shutipi, a music producer who would later be decently well known for his Meiko songs. His pick was selected because it seemed like a name that would be easy for non-Japanese speakers to pronounce, and because it nicely complemented the already settled upon Meiko, who was named after her voice provider Haigo Meiko. KAITO is sometimes referred to as Shion KAITO, but this is something that fans made up themselves. KAITO has no official family name and never has. I can't seem to find an exact source for why fans latched onto Shion as opposed to any other theoretical family name, but it's been around for almost as long as KAITO has. I say almost because upon his initial release, KAITO didn't have all that many fans to refer to him as anything. As I mentioned, there wasn't a lot of marketing done for KAITO, or for any of the V1s. Hatsune Miku made the technology take off among amateur and indie musicians, but before her, that market really wasn't on anybody's radar that much. Instead, Vocaloid was showcased at music industry trade shows, like Music Mess in 2003 in Frankfurt, and the National Association of Music Merchants Show of 2004 in Anaheim. Above all else, it was a tool for the very niche market of professional songwriters and musicians. YouTube was still in its infancy at this time, having launched a year to the day before KAITO's release, and Nico Nico only launched in December of 2006. Now, KAITO at least got an illustrated character, unlike his English counterparts who had stock images for box art, and he got an article in the April 2006 issue of DTM magazine, a publication for quote desktop musicians that would soon become a pillar of the Vocaloid community. But besides that, there wasn't much else. So, no one expected blockbuster sales for KAITO, but he still underperformed pretty dramatically. Meiko had sold about 3,000 units, and the minimum target for KAITO was 1,000. In his first year on the market, though, he barely got half that. Now, we don't have unit sales numbers for most voice banks, so it's hard to compare raw numbers. And that's not even taking into account how much sales expectations have changed post-Miku. But to this day, KAITO remains the one and only Vocaloid to have been declared a commercial failure. Famous last words, as it turns out, but more on that in a minute. KAITO's poor sales relative to Meiko were blamed on DTM's overwhelmingly male readership, which brings me back to the point I raised at the beginning. KAITO sold poorly, and the lesson that Yamaha and Krypton took from that was that male Vocaloids in general would sell poorly. They were already looking ahead to the upcoming Vocaloid 2 update, and Krypton doubled down on the idea that a cute girl was easier to market when they started working on Hatsune Miku. However, because Vocaloid developers didn't actually make equal numbers of masculine and feminine voice banks from here forward, we can't actually know how right they were in their assumptions about sales. I don't think that anyone will disagree that cute anime girls are good for getting people to buy things, but so are cute anime boys. If Hatsune Miku had been Hatsune Hajime, would we have found the same explosive popularity? Probably not, if we're being honest. The Miku we know and love does have a certain je ne sais quoi about her. And what's more, there's also a bias towards feminine voices in Utao, where there aren't the same financial and marketing incentives. The ratio of feminine to masculine Utao banks is a lot more even because anyone can make one, but a lot of the most popular ones are girls. See again, Kasane Teto. Regardless, when it comes to commercial vocal synthesizers, KAITO's initial failure seems to have taught a lesson that we're still seeing the effects of today. But again, famous last words, initial failure. If you're listening to a podcast about singing robots, you already know that KAITO didn't stay down for long. A year and a half after he stumbled at the starting pistol, Hatsune Miku tore down the whole racetrack and rebuilt it in her own image. Sales rose for all of the existing Vocaloids in her wake, but KAITO's resurgence in particular came as a pleasant surprise for the folks over at Krypton. Now, the 500-unit figure is properly cited on the Vocaloid wiki, but I can't say the same for the next numbers, so take them with a grain of salt. However, he allegedly sold 100 units in just January of 2008, and then another 1,000 by June of that year. As time went on, he'd outpaced Meiko in popularity, who had originally sold so much better than him. Krypton hadn't expected anyone to take much interest in the older V1 products when V2 was, among other things, much more user-friendly. But in hindsight, I think it does make sense. Miku was the cute hook who got people to take vocal synthesizers seriously, but once people accepted that a robot voice was a creative possibility, not all of them were going to stick to the same robot voice, regardless of how cute she is. Plus, KAITO proved incredibly versatile once people gave him a chance. His V1 bank was very high quality since he was the last release for the engine and Yamaha had learned from the other releases. He's also very flexible in terms of genre, even though Fuga Naoto's musical training was mostly in jazz and musical theater styles. And what's more, though Meiko was marketed as his official counterpart, KAITO also sounded really good paired with Miku. I mean, I still think that he's still one of the most flexible choices for any duet or ensemble, blending well with everyone from Rin Len to Gakupo to the human cast of Project Sekai, but Miku was his most frequent partner in those early days. The songs that most immediately come to mind for me from this period are Cantarella by Kuro Usapi, released February 21st, 2008, and Cendrillon by Signal P and Orange from August of that year. It's easy to lump them together since they share their dark fairy tale vibes, and of course the titles do sound similar. Cendrillon is of course just the French version of Cinderella, fitting when it features the voice of Prince Charming himself. And while Cantarella also sounds like a variant of the Glass Slipper Tale, it's actually the name of a poison. Specifically, Cantarella was the term given to a mysterious poison allegedly used by some members of the House of Borgias against their enemies in the 15th century. It may very well have just been powdered arsenic, but Cantarella certainly sounds more elegant, suitable for a song driven by violin riffs and themes of deadly seduction. Both songs have also since gotten remakes. Cantarella Grace Edition came out in 2013, and Cendrillon 10th Anniversary version came out in 2018. Fuga Naoto has also sung covers of Cantarella Grace and the original mix of Cendrillon, with a singer called Milia handling Miku's parts. It's a fascinating listening experience to compare the different versions of the songs, for Cantarella in particular. I don't think that Signal P did anything too fancy in terms of tuning for either version of Cendrillon, so Fuga's version is the sharpest contrast there. But the vocals in all three versions of Cantarella are markedly different. KAITO sounds much more solid in the original, while the Grace Edition was released with a later version of his voice banks, and presents a more subdued and indeed seductive-sounding vocal. Fuga, meanwhile, with his more old-fashioned music training, gives a decidedly theatrical performance, with stronger vibrato and more fluid, exaggerated deliveries of certain words. Of course, these songs take themselves pretty seriously, and the weird, silly songs were just as important to the Miku and KAITO landscape. In fact, arguably the single biggest shift for KAITO's popularity came less than 3 weeks after Miku's release, when on September 16, 2007, a Nico Nico user called Tatsunami released a parody cover of the song Higurashi no Naku Koro ni from the game series Higurashi When They Cry. This version of the song, titled A Request from Hatsune, directly implores the audience to, quote, please sometimes recall KAITO. Miku also addresses Kaito directly in the video, asking, "Where are you? And what are you doing now?" A mere 4 hours later, Ice-P uploaded an answer to Hatsune Miku. In it, Kaito responds, "Yes, I was eating ice cream," and then sings a cover of the 1960 novelty song by Saiku Shu, The Ice Cream Song. Kaito ends the video by saying, "Miku, let's eat together next time." Apparently, Ice-P had already been working on the cover anyway when he saw Tatsunami's video, and he quickly reworked what he had done so that it could serve as an answer. This lucky bit of good timing introduced countless Miku fans to Kaito for the very first time, and they liked what they saw. This exchange is also the reason why Kaito is still associated with ice cream to this day. I've seen so many comics, Talkloid videos, animatics, and MMD animations about Kaito and ice cream, whether he's chasing after an ice cream truck, going berserk on some poor fool trying to separate him from his ice cream, usually Len, or just crying over having dropped his cone. More Kaito songs and covers about or referencing ice cream have followed in answer, my favorite of which is an adorable parody of Ryo's Melt called My Ice Cream is Melting. The ice cream lore has even made it into Project Sekai. Kaito's introduction in the Vivid Bad Squad story is him getting chewed out by Rin and Len for taking Len's ice cream from the shared freezer. He gets in more trouble for ice cream-related shenanigans in several other card stories and area conversations, as well as some perfectly nice, wholesome moments related to his sweet tooth, just to balance things out. It's also indirectly implied that the other versions of Kaito also like ice cream, with the possible exception of Night Court at 2500 Kaito, who doesn't seem to like much of anything. And ice cream isn't the only meme worth highlighting from this era. One of the very first Kaito hits was Urotander Underhanded Rangers by Shinpei, which came out on November 23, 2007, and also featured Miku and Meiko. This song is relatively unknown in the Western fandom, and it still only has an official Nico Nico upload and no YouTube to this day, but it's much more popular back home in Japan. This song sounds like something straight out of the 90s, and Kaito plays the leader of a humorous parody of the Super Sentai/Power Ranger style fighters. Instead of behaving like good, manly heroes, the Urotander are dirty fighting cowards who will do anything to win. If you check out anything from the links that I've put in the show notes, please watch the Project Diva footage for this song. It's absolutely hilarious. Miku brandishes a crowbar painted like a leek, and Kaito inexplicably shoots laser beams out of his pecs. The cherry on top is that the Sentai theme also has a link back to Fuga Naoto, who sang the theme song for Denji's Sentai Mega Ranger in the late 90s. A lesser-known Kaito and Miku joke song, but one I personally thought was worth bringing up just for its video thumbnail alone, is Brother is Worried by Sukepi. Miku doesn't actually sing in this one, but she takes the role of Kaito's younger sister, to whom he is rather overly attached. In the song, Kaito does the creepy older brother stuff that you get in the most stereotypically gross anime out there, which I wouldn't actually find funny if it weren't for the fact that at the end of the song, after Kaito has been haranguing Miku to follow Mei-chan's example and become too strong for anyone to mess with, Miku and Meiko then team up to beat the crap out of him for his behavior, complete with punching sound effects straight out of Mortal Kombat 1. The aforementioned thumbnail art is Miku suplexing Kaito like a WWE star, his stupid gangly limbs and scarf sprawling out everywhere. A more popular Kaito solo joke song is Shineba ii no ni, or I Wish They'd Just Die, with music by Debu and lyrics by Yukaina Vorpal Bunnies, released January 2009. With a bright synth-pop instrumental and an MS Paint-looking video, Kaito cheerfully wishes death upon various mild annoyances, including spam texts, bugs, noisy construction workers, and baseball games running over their scheduled time and ruining his TiVo recordings. The song goes on for 5 minutes, and I really hope that wherever Yukaina Vorpal Bunnies is now, their blood pressure is under control. And one last joke song before we move on, there's When I Get Home, My Wife Always Pretends to Be Dead by Hobonichipi. This one actually had Hatsune Miku as the original singer, but a cover with Kaito got very popular, and he's depicted as the husband coming home in the animated fan video. The song was based off of a viral Yahoo Answers Japan page from 2010 in which the poster listed the ever-escalating stunts that his wife had been pulling to pretend she'd violently died to scare him. In the song, it's portrayed as a bizarre but ultimately endearing bid for attention from the wife. In the end, Kaito the husband fondly wonders what sort of death he'll get today. Now, after all my talk of joke songs, I'd be remiss not to mention a few solo Kaito songs that are unironically good on their own merit. Mothi has used Kaito for various roles in his sprawning Ivilius Chronicles series, the most notable of which is as Galarian Marlin, the wicked and avaricious judge who narrates the tale of Judgment of Corruption. This song serves as the entry for Greed in the sub-series themed around the 7 deadly sins. It was first released on the Evil's Kingdom album in 2010, before the music video came out the following year. Another song with dark, fantastical vibes is Ashes to Ashes by Tennen, with lyrics by Niboshi. If you've seen that Project Diva module for KAITO with the porcelain cracks in his face and the thigh-high boots, this is the song responsible for that outfit. Though you don't actually see KAITO's legs in the original PV at all, so Sega came up with the boots all on their own. I've stressed how versatile KAITO is, and I think that this song demonstrates that the best of what I've mentioned so far. He's not the most powerful voice bank out there, but this song has some strong metal influences, and it's just overall very loud. Even so, KAITO sounds perfectly solid and strong amidst all the noise. On the other end of KAITO's vocal spectrum, Yukis wrote a brilliant Japanese folk-inspired song called Flower Tale, released in March of 2011. It quotes some lyrics from one of Yukis' Mako songs, Fairy Tailed, and both that song and Flower Tale borrow a snippet of the melody from Yukis' song Nostalgic. But that's not even the most interesting thing that Yukis did here. Much like how traditional folk music was often sung in groups, Flower Tale features no fewer than 25 vocal tracks, with KAITO serving as both the bold, distinctive lead and his own backing choir. And of course, there's 1,000 Year Solo by Yanagi P, first released April 27, 2008, and still a staple of any good KAITO playlist. This is another gorgeous Japanese folk fusion track, but there have also been a good number of remixes that have gotten very popular which transpose it to other genres, the most notable of which is definitely the one by Sasakure UK. It's been featured in several live concerts, the most recent of which was in 2023, and it's another song that Fuga Naoto has covered as well. 1,000 Year Solo was also used as a demo song for KAITO's planned append voice banks. See, as KAITO rode the tide of good jokes and better music to popularity, Krypton decided they had to change some plans. Mako and KAITO were never really intended to get updates once the Vocaloid 2 voice banks were out there to replace them, but people seemed to like them all of a sudden, so they'd like an upgraded version even more, right? That said, getting Megurine Luka finished, and then the appends for Miku, Rin, and Len was the priority. So when Krypton started on KAITO and Mako's updates, they couldn't be sure whether they'd be ready in time to release on Vocaloid 2, or if they'd have to wait for 3. They were also developing KAITO and Mako totally separately, even if they were still going to be marketed as male and female counterparts. Starting from late 2010 and all through 2011, Krypton's development team, led by Sasaki Wataru, or just Wat, did plenty of experimenting to figure out how to make the best KAITO that they could. Here, KAITO's flexibility as an all-rounder vocalist actually worked against him a bit, as Watt felt that it was difficult to get the more specialized sounds, or expression of color, as he put it, as they teased out of Miku, Rin, and Len for their appends. These prototype KAITO voice banks were differentiated as much by the equipment and processing as by Fuga Naoto's performance in the moment, while Fujita Saki and Shimoda Asami voice-acted a lot while recording the appends. Instead, with KAITO, Krypton was seeing what different sounds could be created by having Fuga Naoto record on different equipment configurations, or by altering the voice samples in post-production. In the end, Krypton didn't finish the voice banks before Vocaloid 3's deadline, but they made enough progress on these Vocaloid 2 compatible voice banks that they were able to send out these beta versions to a few producers, so some songs with KAITO V2 do exist. Most notably, Oster Project used the V2 betas for the iconic KAITO Mako duet On the Rocks, which was a commissioned song for the game Hatsune Miku and Future Stars Project Mirai. Besides the game release and the later single, On the Rocks also got a special performance at the Matsuri da Diva event on March 9, 2014. A small concert featuring both Miku and the Krypton voice providers held to promote the Project Diva F2 game release. Haigo Mako and Fuga Naoto were the main performers, and they are clearly having so much fun during the performance, especially during On the Rocks. Fuga even wore a blue scarf. At this point, I've dropped enough references to Fuga's enthusiastic contributions to the Vocaloid scene that I might as well just say it outright. No one is a bigger KAITO fan than Fuga Naoto. He outright calls KAITO his son, and he is a very proud dad. Besides all of the covers of KAITO songs that he's done, he frequently retweets KAITO art and chats with fellow fans on Twitter, and most of his Instagram page is just pictures of KAITO merch. He even cosplays, and frequently posts pictures of himself going out dressed to the nines in KAITO hoodies and accessories. It's a little over the top, but mostly just genuinely endearing. My favorite posts from him are the ones where he takes a picture of one of his cats with a KAITO toy, and captions it with some variation on, "Look at my wonderful daughter and son." Really, instead of Shion KAITO, fans really should just call him Fuga KAITO. With that kind of attitude, I doubt that Fuga minded all that much when he had to redo some of the recordings they'd already finished to shift from Vocaloid 2 to Vocaloid 3. More time working on a project he loved, and he was getting paid either way. The team finished KAITO V3 in time for release on February 15, 2013 as a package of 4 voice banks: straight, soft, whisper, and English. KAITO Straight was designed to have about the same all-rounder sound as the original Vocaloid 1 bank, but there were enough differences in quality and tone that Watt would describe the two packages as brothers. Personally, I don't hear that much difference, but I've always struggled to hear the nitty-gritty differences between voice banks compared to the more obvious differences that you get from song to song with producers' individual tuning styles. That said, I do still see people making KAITO V1 covers and originals, more often than I see Mako V1 or the original English Vocaloids used back in those days, so there must be something substantial there that I don't quite grasp. Meanwhile, Soft and Whisper were, obviously, designed for gentler and breathier performances. Per Krypton themselves, Soft was considered the most natural and realistic sounding of the three, which I can believe, but I also think that's the one where KAITO's the likeliest to come out sounding like a Muppet if you don't know what you're doing. I shouldn't judge, I've never actually used the KAITO voice bank, and I do love Muppets, but I don't think that I'm alone in thinking that he does sound a little Kermit-ish now and then. And of course, this was KAITO's debut as an Ingloid. Krypton took cues from native English voice banks created by Zero G and Power FX, and tapped overseas producers like Circus P and Empath P for quality testing to help refine KAITO's English performance. The former made a version of his song Circus Monster to serve as one of KAITO's demos, which Circus had actually done once before, since Circus Monster was also used to demo Oliver, while Empath P used her songs Rose and Thorn and Anonymous. The producer Sat also reused their Big Al song Yes Yes as a KAITO demo, but with all due respect to Sat, I don't think that this one is the best example of KAITO's English. KAITO definitely has a heavier accent than some of the other Japanese to English voice banks out there, no matter who's tuning him, but in Yes Yes he's very nearly incomprehensible. Sorry, Sat. KAITO's design also got some sprucing up. Krypton hired the illustrator Ishima to create the new box art, and she's done basically all of the Kryptonoid box art since then. Her art style is also very clearly the basis for the style in Project Sekai, and it all started here with KAITO. Overall, KAITO V3 was very warmly received. In the month after the package's release, it was Krypton's best-selling product, and this period marked when KAITO's popularity officially overtook Mako's. In fact, a 2015 survey of Nico Nico found that KAITO had been the 5th most popular Vocaloid overall in the whole year of 2014, not just among Kryptonoids. Unfortunately, this is another source link that goes back to a page that's no longer there, so I can neither confirm the veracity of the claim nor say for sure who it was ahead of KAITO, but given that this was coming off the heels of Kagero Project's peak popularity, my guess is that the top 4 were Miku, Iya, Gumi, and maybe Rin or Len, not necessarily in that order. Regardless, KAITO has generally remained the most popular adult male Vocaloid, even as he finally started to get some more company. V3 introduced Yohyoloid, Bruno, and the Zola Project, and Vocaloid 4 brought us Arsloid, Dex, Fukase, Yujin Longya, and Cyber Songman, as well as various updates to older voice banks like Gakupo. Of course, we do need to account for language differences. Yujin Longya obviously was more popular for Mandarin users, though in the course of researching this episode, I did find some examples here and there of KAITO being used for Chinese. Notably, KAITO sang an alternate version of Sun Quan the Emperor by Wugu Isui, originally with Luo Tianyi, with his lyrics from a different character's perspective on the story. To my untrained ear, KAITO handles the Chinese pretty well. On the other hand, KAITO's English has stood up pretty well against even native English banks. Sat, who wrote that demo song Yes Yes, improved his KAITO tuning skills a lot with their song Reload Words. A personal favorite of mine is Speak by Scone, which I think is terribly underrated. And Empath P has used KAITO here and there outside of those demos, most recently in 2021 for her song Ennui. And though it isn't so noteworthy that Circus P has used KAITO when he's used more Vocaloids than he hasn't, the songs themselves are worth mentioning, including 1-4, one of my favorites from Circus ever, and more recently, Electric Weekend Zone. The latter was a collab with Flavor Foley for KAITO's 19th anniversary last year, commissioned by the Project Sekai team. Circus had worked with them before, but Flavor Foley hadn't even been working together as a team for a whole year yet when that happened, so I remember a lot of pleasant surprise throughout the fandom to see them acknowledged by such a big name. And for KAITO's anniversary, no less. There have been a few commissioned songs exclusive to the English-language global server of Project Sekai, but most of them have featured Miku. My money would have been on Luca getting one before KAITO, since she was the original English-capable Kryptonoid, but for whatever reason, they picked KAITO and got an excellent song for their trouble. But maybe it's not so surprising. While Miku is still obviously the star, Project Sekai has been pretty good overall about giving everybody some much-needed love, including KAITO. He doesn't always sound the best, admittedly, but the tuning is unfortunately hit or miss for all of the virtual singers, even Miku. That said, KAITO's had at least a couple of standout performances with each of the groups in Project Sekai, and especially, in my opinion, with Night Court at 2500. With Nightcord, KAITO is depicted as an angry and abrasive man, brought into the group dynamic as an avatar of unresolved hurts. He was the last virtual singer character to be introduced across the whole game, but in the relatively short time that he's been there, we've gotten some knockout songs with him and the 4 female Nightcord singers. Samsa by Tenny Woha, his first with the group, not only remains popular among the fan base writ large, but is still my personal favorite commissioned song from the whole history of the game. Samsa was commissioned for one of the event songs focused on the character Kanade, and its success may have influenced the decision to bring KAITO back for Kanade's next focus song, Passionate 2500 by Kanzaki Iori, which also has a place very high in my personal rankings. KAITO also features in the terrifying Bake no Hana by Nakiso, the song commissioned for the infamous Mizu 5 story. With a runtime of just under 2 minutes and 5 singers to balance, KAITO doesn't actually get that many lines, but Bake no Hana is nonetheless the most viewed song with KAITO on YouTube, and has gotten there in under 2 years. I'll circle back to his most viewed solo song in a minute, but one more Nightcore performance worth mentioning is their extraordinary take on Heat Abnormal by Iowa. The original featured Arachi Rei, whose voice is about as different as you can get from KAITO's while still remaining in the vocal synth world. It's also not a song that was really intended for human singers at all, people who need to do silly things like breathe once in a while. But the Nightcore singers managed that by trading lines back and forth, able to keep up the relentless pace of the verses without any one person singing long enough to let the strain show. KAITO's deeper voice rounds out the harmonies beautifully, and at the very end of the song, when KAITO solos the last lines, it reflects the story told by the lyrics. The only one left is the robot, singing alone without pausing for breath. As a footnote, the Nightcore version directly inspired Earthy X6's solo cover of the song with KAITO, one of the best KAITO covers of any song out there. I've always found that the vocal fry features in Vocaloid to be a huge pain to use, but Earthy's a master of that effect, and KAITO's voice is very well suited to it. Anyway, the subject of Project Sekai covers brings me back to that #1 solo song. Shanti by Wotaku has 15 million YouTube views, a kick-ass cover by Vivid Bad Squad, and a spot on my personal favorites list, as I actually talked about in the episode I released before this one. Wotaku is easily one of the highest profile producers right now who currently uses KAITO on a regular basis. And even though Shanti is the crowd favorite, Wotaku has several other works worth your time, including Literacy, Zero Sum, and most recently, Phobos, a self-cover of a song that first featured Miku. Haleyoshi has also done some amazing work with KAITO, both as a soloist and as part of a group. Haleyoshi is arguably best known for his big ensemble pieces that feature the whole Krypton crew, including Blessing, Connecting, and I'm Mine, and he's also done a couple of duets between KAITO and Len. In 2023, they sang the Vocaloid version of Flyway, which was written as a commission for Project Seikai's Leo Need group, and Haleyoshi's most recent song as of recording is a KAITO-Len duet called Danro Gumo. As for Haleyoshi's solo outings with KAITO, we've got the ever-iconic Snowman and Atakaito. The former was a commission for Project Mirai 2 back in 2013, and has since gotten a remake for the song's 10th anniversary, while the latter was made for KAITO's 10th anniversary album Glorious Blue in 2016, which then got a single release in 2020 for the 14th anniversary. KAITO's anniversary is actually a bit of a funny thing. Yamaha and Krypton printed different dates for that original 2006 release, specifically February 14th and 17th. So even though we can go back and confirm that the KAITO software was available for purchase on February 14th, KAITO sort of gets a double anniversary, an anniversary long weekend, celebrating all the way up to the 17th. Which might go some way to explaining just how many of KAITO's best and most popular songs are anniversary releases, especially from the last few years. Producer Renji worked with lyricist Katabiya Yui to create Rainy Snowdrop for KAITO's 15th anniversary, releasing the song for Magical Mirai 2021. He presumably got the gig after the success of his previous KAITO songs like Caged Flower, Devotion, Mini Amaru Keipatsu, and Stalemate, that last one being a KAITO Miku duet. The following year, Kashi Moimi gave us Tears of Garnet for the 16th anniversary, and for the 17th, we got Merry Unbirthday by Natsuyama Yotsugi. I personally particularly like the 18th anniversary song Mass Negotiation by Sobana, and for the 19th, we got the aforementioned Electric Weekend Zone and also You Love Me by Akko. I'll get to this year's 20th anniversary at the end, but one more producer I should mention before I move on is Nya Nya Nya, whose most famous KAITO work is probably Dr. Funk Beat. This one has also gotten a Vivid Bad Squad cover, albeit one I admittedly don't much care for. Personally, I prefer the duets that Nya 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 has done with KAITO. There's Fräulein Biblioteca, the duet version of a song which originally just had Meiko, and El Tengo Egoista, which was the first song I ever heard to pair up KAITO with Luca. Since then, it's become one of my favorite Vocaloid matchups. And KAITO and Luca are also the duet featured in a fantastic song that came out just a few days before I recorded the episode, Luoyang Vigilante by Miyamori Bungaku. It's the most recent of a series of songs that he's done themed around shady characters in various Chinese and Taiwanese cities. And though this one hasn't been translated yet, what I can gather from the music video alone is intriguing. As a side note, it was also interesting to look up Luoyang, which I'd never heard of before. Turns out it's one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world outside of the Middle East. Luoyang Vigilante is one of several great recent KAITO releases, which only drives home his staying power. However, whether KAITO's software will see any further development is somewhat in the air. In 2024, celebrating 20 years of Vocaloid releases, Krypton Future Media released the Vocaloid Super Pack of all 6 of their Vocaloids. This re-release was based off of the same raw recordings made the last time each of these voice banks got an update, which in KAITO's case was his V3 package more than 10 years ago now. These were just reprocessed and generally spruced up for higher quality. What new recordings Fuga Naoto has made since 2013, if any, remain ambiguous. Krypton announced in 2019 that they were shifting focus away from Vocaloid towards their own synth engine, the Piapro new type lineup, but Miku, Rin, and Len are the only ones who have gotten NT releases. And those have gotten mixed reception, to say the least. A lot of the folks I see in YouTube comments complaining about the rougher Project Sekai performances often blame it on the use of NT voice banks, but Colorful Palette and Seika have never released much information on how they make any given cover or Talkloid segment for the game. There's also no KAITO NT voice bank publicly available for use, the numerous and creative prank videos that you'll find notwithstanding, so we don't have much to compare the Project Sekai content to be sure. We may still get KAITO NT, since he has been announced, but I'd say the odds are better than a coin flip that we'll also get a bit of a backtrack towards Vocaloid again. Miku V6 has already gotten a beta release, and if she sells well, I see no reason why Krypton wouldn't at least try the same with the other Kryptonloids. I'm sure that Fuga Naoto will be excited to participate regardless, no matter what form it takes. He's certainly taken very good care of his voice, but he is in his 60s now, so I'll be curious to see what effect that may have on any future KAITO's voice bank tones. In the meantime, though, people are still making great music with the KAITO voice banks we know and love. I originally wanted to get this episode out on February 14th, in time for the anniversary, but I held off when I realized just how much music I'd miss out that way. I won't list all of the songs that I found because there's frankly too many of them, but I'll have an extended list in the show notes and leave you with some of my favorites. First, the official birthday theme commissioned by Krypton Future Media is Blue Fire by Seki Komi Gohan, which might have my favorite video art of any KAITO anniversary song ever. Producer Matsubi released a very snazzy little tune called Forever Like This, and Akko, who did one of the 19th anniversary songs, has released not one but 2 KAITO songs the last few days, called All Kinds of Things and Don't Let Me Fool You, Girl. Hinayuki, who wrote the iconic KAITO Meiko duet Paired Wintry Winds, wrote what might be my favorite of the 20th anniversary stuff, a song called Initiator. Per usual for Hinayuki, the song incorporates traditional Japanese folk music, but there's an interesting electric violin sound in there that also lends to an almost American folk sound too. Meanwhile, 2 of the most uplifting, feel-good songs of the bunch were Blue Song by Madoi and Since the Time I Met You by Rodao. The former, an upbeat, house-influenced pop song that almost reminds me a little bit of Avicii in his heyday, and the latter a soaring, piano-driven ballad. The cover artists were no slackers either. Rei Kai-nyan teamed up with 5 other KAITO superfans to do a collaborative cover of Urotando Underhanded Rangers with different KAITO tunings. Or, as they put it, in order to defeat evil, he has decided to learn the art of cloning himself and overwhelming the enemy with the sheer force of numbers. Another collaborative effort was the cosplay dance cover of Paired Wintry Winds that I found. The channel, Garcia Aoi, belongs to the Meiko cosplayer, but I'm afraid I don't know how to pronounce the name of the dancer who performed KAITO's part. Credit for him linked back to a Bilibili page, and I have no idea how to read the characters in his name, so my link in the notes will have to suffice. And I'll close with the most thematically appropriate song. YouTube user KAITO Kisser made a cover of Jamie Page's Machine Love with KAITO V3 and V1 and a crew of over a dozen volunteer illustrators. Like Jamie's original with Teto, KAITO Kisser and company put together a lovely video paying tribute to KAITO's history, with borrowed footage from other KAITO videos and drawings of so many of his most iconic looks, including many of the ones that I've mentioned in this video. There are other covers of Machine Love out there, but I'd say that this one shows the most effort and care out of any of them. So whether I introduce you to some new favorites today, or you're a KAITO fan already who'd recognize all of the songs in the Machine Love lineup, I hope that you've had fun with me as we celebrate our beloved Blue Boy. Enjoy the music, go have some ice cream. 39 big thank yous for listening. Like and subscribe and all that jazz. Check out the socials via Linktree in the description, and feel free to reach out with questions, feedback, or just to chat about singing robots with me. Happy Synthesizers is written and produced by Kay Judson. The theme music is Eve and Polka, arranged with inspiration from Lloyd Tuma and Automania.